In the heart of Arkansas, where the Arkansas River winds its way through the frontier landscape at the confluence with the Poteau River, stands a testament to one of America's most turbulent periods of law enforcement, the Fort Smith Federal Jail. This imposing structure, which operated from 1872 to 1896, earned the ominous nickname Hell on the Border, and became notorious as the seat of Judge Isaac C. Parker, famously known as the Hanging Judge. The site was originally established as a military fort in 1817 by Major William Bradford, named after General Thomas Smith, with the first permanent settlement growing around it, becoming the city of Fort Smith. The jail, built within the confines of the second Fort Smith, constructed in 1838 at a cost of $31,000, represented federal authority in what was then considered the wildest territory in the American frontier. Judge Parker's jurisdiction covered 74,000 square miles, including western Arkansas and Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, an area seething with outlaws, desperados, and those seeking refuge from the law. Upon his arrival on May 4, 1875, Parker famously declared, "I came here to dispense justice, that I shall do until the hour of my death." His first day in court saw him charge 8 men with murder, setting the tone for his legendary tenure. The prison itself was a grim structure of native stone and iron, with walls 3 feet thick and cells that held up to 12 prisoners each. Designed by architect Adolphus Kalkman, who had previously designed several military installations, the jail featured innovative security measures for its time, including a double lock system and reinforced window frames. The basement level, known as Hell on the Border, was particularly dreaded. This underground chamber, with little ventilation and no natural light, regularly flooded during heavy rains, forcing prisoners to stand in ankle-deep water for days. One prisoner, William Whitehead, described it as a dungeon that would shame the Spanish Inquisition. Another inmate, James Casper, wrote in his smuggled diary, "The rats here are better fed than the prisoners, and they have more freedom of movement." During Parker's 21-year tenure, he tried 13,490 cases, with 344 of them being capital crimes. The judge sentenced 160 people to death by hanging, though only 79 of these sentences were actually carried out. His court worked at an astonishing pace, sometimes handling up to 200 cases in a single month. The gallows, constructed in 1886 by prison carpenter George Malladon, who would later become the official hangman, could accommodate up to 6 simultaneous executions and was visible from the jail windows, a constant reminder to inmates of their possible fate. The largest mass execution took place on September 3, 1875, when 6 men, James Moore, Daniel Evans, William Whittington, Edmund Campbell, Samuel Foy, and William Leach, were hanged simultaneously for murder. Their bodies were buried in the nearby Hangman's Grove, where a single wooden marker noted their passing. The jail's most notorious inmate was Cherokee Bill, born Crawford Goldsby, whose real-life exploits rivaled those of any dime novel villain. Born on February 8, 1876, at Fort Concho, Texas, to a mixed-race family, he began his criminal career at age 18 after shooting Jake Lewis during a dispute. His gang terrorized Indian Territory from 1894 to 1895, committing numerous robberies and at least 7 murders. Arrested for murder in 1895 by Constable Ike Rogers, he attempted a dramatic jailbreak on July 26, 1895, in which he shot and killed guard Lawrence Keating. The gun had been smuggled into his cell inside a hollowed-out Bible by a visitor, Nancy Mary Brown. Cherokee Bill met his end on the gallows on March 17, 1896, but not before reportedly stating, "This is about as good a day to die as any." His last meal consisted of hot biscuits, fried chicken, and coffee, a menu that became somewhat traditional for condemned prisoners at Fort Smith. Belle Starr, known as the Bandit Queen, also spent time within these walls. Born Myra Maybelle Shirley on February 5, 1848, near Carthage, Missouri, she was charged with horse theft in 1886. She was held in a special cell away from the male population, in what guards called the ladies' suite, though it was hardly luxurious, consisting of a 6x8-foot cell with a small window. According to prison records maintained by clerk William Faulkner, no relation to the author, she passed her time reading Shakespeare and writing poetry. She particularly favored Macbeth and often quoted Lady Macbeth's lines to her guards. Upon her release, she supposedly told Deputy Marshal Bass Reeves, "This place hasn't reformed me, it's just taught me to be more careful." She would later be murdered on February 3, 1889, near her home in Younger's Bend, Indian Territory, a crime that remains unsolved to this day. The daily operation of the jail fell to generations of U.S. Marshals and their deputies, including the legendary Bass Reeves, one of the first African-American deputy marshals west of the Mississippi. Born into slavery in 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas, Reeves served for 32 years, bringing in over 3,000 criminals to face justice at Fort Smith. His knowledge of Indian Territory and fluency in Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole languages made him one of the most effective lawmen of his time. Deputy Marshal Charles Portis, who would later write about his experiences in True Grit, described Reeves as a man who could track a butterfly through a tornado. Reeves was known for his innovative disguises and techniques, once capturing a mother and 2 sons wanted for murder by disguising himself as a traveling preacher. Life inside the jail was harsh and often brutal. Prisoners were fed a daily diet of cornbread, beans, and salt pork, with meals prepared by prison cook Samuel Old Sam Jackson, who served in this capacity from 1875 to 1894. The daily food allowance per prisoner was 15 cents, equivalent to about $4 today. Disease was rampant, particularly in summer months when temperatures inside the cells could exceed 100 degrees. Prison records show that between 1873 and 1896, over 100 inmates died from various diseases, primarily tuberculosis and typhoid fever. Dr. James Massey, the prison physician, wrote in his report, "The conditions here breed more death than the gallows." His medical logs detailed treatments ranging from traditional medicines to experimental procedures, including the use of mercury compounds for various ailments, a practice that likely caused more harm than good. The jail housed a diverse population that reflected the complex social fabric of the frontier. Official prison records show that among its 3,467 total inmates, there were representatives from 23 Native American tribes, 13 European nationalities, and various American ethnic groups. Among them was Blue Duck, real name Shah Khan Gar, a notorious outlaw of Cherokee and Mexican descent, who received a life sentence instead of hanging due to his young age of 21. Judge Parker made this rare exception after receiving a petition signed by 273 Cherokee Nation citizens, including Chief Dennis Bushyhead. Blue Duck was transferred to Menard Correctional Center in Illinois, where he died of tuberculosis in 1895. His last letter, written in Cherokee and preserved in the Fort Smith Historical Society archives, laments, "I die far from my people, under white man's stone walls." The 1888 escape attempt led by Jack Reen became legendary in prison lore. Reen, along with fellow inmates Thomas Crump, George Paget, Henry Starr, a cousin of Belle Starr, and William Starr, spent 3 months digging their tunnel using stolen spoons and a piece of iron bed frame salvaged from the prison workshop. They had dug nearly 20 feet, disposing of dirt in the prison garden by hiding it in their clothes, before being discovered by guard Timothy O'Leary during a routine inspection on December 12, 1888. All 5 were subsequently executed on April 15, 1889. Prison records indicate that Rayan told hangman George Maladon, "At least we died trying." The tunnel, which can still be seen today, was later measured to be just 8 feet short of reaching outside the walls. Female prisoners, though fewer in number, left their mark on the jail's history. Between 1872 and 1896, 72 women were incarcerated at Fort Smith. Anna Dawson's case particularly captured public attention. Convicted of poisoning her husband James Dawson with arsenic-laced coffee, Evidence emerged during her trial that she had endured years of brutal abuse. Her defense attorney, William H. Clayton, who usually served as prosecutor, presented testimony from 23 witnesses about her husband's cruelty. The Fort Smith Elevator newspaper covered the trial extensively, with editor John Wheeler advocating for her pardon. Though sentenced to death, her sentence was commuted to life imprisonment by President Grover Cleveland after a petition garnered over 7,000 signatures, including that of Judge Parker's wife, Mary. The prison's trustee system, implemented by head jailer John Harrington, was revolutionary for its time. Trustees wore distinctive brown shirts instead of standard prison stripes and earned 2 days off their sentence for every month of good service. Records show that of the 189 prisoners who served as trustees, only 12 attempted escape. The most famous trustee was Henry Starr, who served as prison librarian and established the jail's first lending library with 84 donated books. After his release, Starr would later claim in his autobiography, "Thrilling Events, Life of Henry Starr," that his time as a trustee gave me my first taste of responsibility. The case of James Moore, the 16-year-old executed in 1892, remains one of the most controversial in Fort Smith's history. Born in 1876 near Muskogee, Indian Territory, Moore was convicted of killing a traveling salesman, Herbert Crowley, during a robbery attempt. The trial, which lasted just 3 days in February 1892, drew unprecedented attention when Moore's mother, Sarah, traveled 180 miles by horse and wagon to plead for mercy. Local photographer J.C. Brown captured the famous image of Sarah Moore kneeling before Judge Parker on the courthouse steps, a photograph now housed in the Smithsonian Institution. Despite testimony from prison physician Dr. Theodore Rosewater that Moore was mentally underdeveloped, Parker refused to commute the sentence. Moore's last words, recorded by prison chaplain Francis Springer, were indeed a simple plea: "Tell my mother I died brave." His execution on July 7, 1892, sparked reforms in juvenile justice across the territory. Hanging days transformed Fort Smith into a macabre carnival atmosphere. Contemporary accounts from the Fort Smith Herald describe vendors selling hanging day souvenirs, including pieces of the rope and photographs of the condemned. Local merchant Thomas Adams made a thriving business selling gallows pies, small meat pies he claimed contained the condemned's last meal recipe. The Fort Smith Elevator, under editor John Wheeler, dedicated entire issues to execution coverage. Wheeler's detailed accounts included everything from the condemned's last words to the number of minutes until death was pronounced. One particularly detailed account, from September 1875, described how execution witness Dr. James Maxwell timed each hanging with his gold pocket watch, noting that death occurred between 4 and 6 minutes after the drop. The physical layout of the jail evolved over its 24-year history. Original blueprints by architect Adolphus Kalkman, discovered in 1976 in a courthouse attic, reveal several innovative features. The 3-tier cell block design maximized space while allowing guards on the central platform to observe all cells simultaneously. A sophisticated pulley system, installed in 1885 by prison engineer Marcus Thompson, enabled the simultaneous opening and closing of multiple cell doors, a feature later adopted by other frontier jails. The Hell on the Border basement contained 18 individual cells, each measuring 4x8 feet, with walls covered in limestone to prevent tunneling. Prisoner graffiti, still visible today, includes poems, prayers, and drawings, offering glimpse into the minds of the condemned. Deputy Marshal Bass Reeves' influence on the jail's operations extended beyond his role as a lawman. His intimate knowledge of Indian Territory's geography and customs proved invaluable in both capturing fugitives and maintaining order within the prison. In 1883, he established a network of informants among Native American inmates, helping prevent several planned escapes. His most famous capture was that of Bob Dozier, a notorious outlaw who had evaded arrest for 3 years. Reeves tracked Dozier for 11 days across the Cherokee Nation, finally confronting him in a shootout near present-day Muskogee on December 20, 1878. After Dozier's execution in 1879, Reeves noted in his report, "The law is like a blanket. It covers all men equally." The execution protocol at Fort Smith, developed by hangman George Malladon, became a model for other jurisdictions. Known as the Prince of Hangmen, Malladon executed 60 of the 79 men who died on the gallows between 1875 and 1894. His mathematical approach to hanging, which considered the condemned's weight, height, and physical condition to calculate the precise drop needed for instant death, was documented in his personal notebook, discovered in 1923. Malladon's reputation for efficiency was such that he was consulted by other jurisdictions, including the Texas State Penitentiary at Huntsville. In an 1894 interview with the St. Louis Republic, he claimed, "I never lost a man to a slow death, though prison records indicate at least 3 botched executions under his watch." The jail's visitor policy, outlined in the Rules and Regulations of the United States Jail at Fort Smith, provides fascinating insights into frontier prison administration. Visitors were allowed on Sundays and Wednesdays between 1 o'clock and 4 p.m., with special provisions for clergy and legal counsel. A ledger maintained by guard William McGregor from 1884 to 1889 shows that approximately 8,500 visitors were received, including famous frontier figures like Frank James, visiting his former gang members, and Chief Quanah Parker, advocating for Comanche prisoners. The most frequent visitor was Sarah Bernhardt, a local schoolteacher who visited every Sunday for 15 years to read to illiterate inmates. Healthcare in the facility reflected the harsh realities of 19th century medicine. Dr. James Massey's medical logs detail the use of primitive treatments like bloodletting and mercury compounds. The prison infirmary, a converted storage room added in 1880, could accommodate only 8 patients. During the typhoid outbreak of 1888, which claimed 17 lives, inmates were housed in temporary tents in the prison yard. Dr. Massey's innovative use of carbolic acid as a disinfectant, though controversial at the time, helped prevent further outbreaks. His detailed autopsy reports, preserved in the National Archives, provide valuable information about frontier health conditions and medical practices. Prison records reveal that rehabilitation efforts, though limited by frontier standards, did exist. Chaplain Springer's literacy program was supplemented by vocational training in the prison workshop, where inmates manufactured furniture and leather goods. Records show that 142 inmates learned trades such as carpentry, blacksmithing, and leatherworking. The prison library, started with Henry Starr's efforts, grew to over 400 volumes, including religious texts, practical manuals, and popular novels. Surviving checkout records show that The Count of Monte Cristo was the most frequently borrowed book, perhaps due to its theme of escape and revenge. The closing of Fort Smith Federal Jail in 1896 marked the end of an era in frontier justice. The final prisoner, Jim July, also known as Justice Fellows, was transferred to the newly built federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas, on September 1, 1896. The building remained abandoned until 1914, when it was converted into a museum. During renovation work in 1968, workers discovered a cache of documents hidden in a wall cavity, including letters, crude maps, and a diary belonging to prisoner William Phillips, offering new insights into daily life behind the walls of Hell on the Border. Behind iron bars in the desert, the haunting legacy of Yuma Territorial Prison. In the scorching Sonoran Desert of Arizona, where temperatures routinely soar above 120 degrees Fahrenheit, stands a grim reminder of frontier justice, the Yuma Territorial Prison. Opening its heavy iron gates on July 1, 1876, with the admission of its first inmate, William Hall, convicted of grand larceny for stealing 2 mules from the U.S. Army at Fort Grant. Hall, who would serve his full 2-year sentence, later remarked in a letter to his sister, "Even the devil himself would find this place too hot for his liking." This forbidding institution, would go on to house 3,069 prisoners during its 33 years of operation, including inmates from every corner of the Arizona Territory, from Prescott to Tombstone. Perched strategically on a bluff overlooking the Colorado River at the confluence with the Gila River, the prison was the brainchild of Territorial Legislature member Thomas Gates, who proposed its construction in 1875. The initial construction budget was $25,000, equivalent to approximately $600,000 today. The first 7 inmates, led by convicted murderer Francisco Flores, were tasked with building their own cells, literally carving their future confinement from the unforgiving desert rock. These pioneering prisoners lived in excavated caves along the riverbank until the first cell block was completed, surviving temperatures that often reached 140 degrees inside their temporary dwellings. Prison guard James McGee wrote in his journal, "These men are building their own hell, stone by stone, under a merciless sun." Despite its intimidating reputation and the nickname Hell Hole, Yuma Territorial Prison was surprisingly progressive for its era. The facility boasted amenities that many law-abiding citizens of the territory lacked, including electricity, running water from the Colorado River, and one of the first public libraries in Arizona. The prison library, established in 1879 by Superintendent Thomas Gates, contained over 2,000 volumes, including works in Spanish, German, and Chinese. The prison band, known as the Iron Band, was directed by inmate William "Banjo Bill" Crawford, who served time for cattle rustling. They performed weekly concerts that drew visitors from as far as Phoenix and San Diego. The cells, however, told a different story. Measuring a mere 9 by 12 feet, each cell housed up to 6 prisoners, with iron bunk beds stacked 3 high against the granite walls. In the sweltering summer heat, the temperature inside these confined spaces could reach unbearable levels. Pearl Hart, the famous female stagecoach robber who became one of the prison's most notorious inmates, described the conditions in her memoir. "The summer heat was so intense that the iron doors of our cells would become too hot to touch, and the air so thick it felt like breathing through a wet blanket." Hart, who robbed a Globe to Florence stagecoach with her accomplice Joe Boot, became a media sensation and received special treatment, including a private cell with a yard where she cultivated flowers. Discipline at the prison was strict and often brutal, overseen by the infamous Captain William Werninger, known for his innovative punishment methods. The infamous dark cell, a windowless isolation chamber constructed in 1878, was used to punish troublesome inmates. Prisoners would be stripped to their underwear, ball and chained, and left in complete darkness for up to several days. The only ventilation came from small holes in the ceiling, and the cell was reportedly infested with bats, scorpions, and black widow spiders. John Ryan, an inmate who spent 104 hours in the dark cell in 1881 for attempting to incite a riot, later wrote in his contraband diary, "Time loses all meaning in that black hole. A minute feels like an hour, and a day feels like eternity. The darkness is so thick you can taste it, and the silence so complete you can hear your own blood rushing through your veins." The prison population was as diverse as the territory itself. Among its inmates were Mexican revolutionaries like Augustin Chacon, who was imprisoned for murder and claimed to have killed 52 men, Mormon polygamists such as William Jordan Flake, founder of Snowflake, Arizona, and Chinese immigrants like Wong Li, imprisoned for operating an opium den in Tucson's Chinese Quarter. One of the most interesting cases was that of Elena Estrada, who was sentenced for cutting out her unfaithful lover's heart in a crime of passion in Tucson's Barrio Viejo. The prison records note that she made an excellent seamstress during her incarceration and even taught other inmates the art of needlework. Despite the harsh conditions, the death rate at Yuma was surprisingly low compared to other frontier prisons. Only 111 prisoners died during the prison's operation, with most deaths attributed to tuberculosis rather than violence or execution. The prison's hospital, overseen by Dr. George Goodfellow, known as the gunfighter's surgeon from his practice in Tombstone, was considered advanced for its time. Forced bathing and regular medical inspections were mandatory, practices that were revolutionary in late 19th century incarceration. Dr. Goodfellow's detailed medical records provide fascinating insights into frontier medicine, including his treatment of gunshot wounds and tuberculosis cases. The prison also served as an unlikely economic engine for the growing town of Yuma. Prisoners manufactured and sold handicrafts, including handmade lace, jewelry, and leather goods, to local residents through the prison's prison store. Inmate Antonio Romero became famous for his intricate horsehair bridles, which sold for as much as $50 each, a considerable sum in the 1880s. The prison's electrical plant, installed by inventor and former Edison employee Frank Murphy in 1884, even provided power to Yuma's homes and businesses before the town had its own generating facility, leading locals to joke that the prison had better amenities than the town. Murphy himself was serving time for forgery, but was granted special privileges due to his technical expertise. Between 1876 and 1909, 29 successful escapes were recorded, though most escapees were eventually recaptured. The most dramatic escape was that of Jesus Rodriguez in 1887, who reportedly spent months gradually filing through his cell bars using strands of women's hair soaked in acid, obtained from a sympathetic female visitor named Maria Moreno. Rodriguez's freedom was short-lived. He was recaptured 3 months later in Sonora, Mexico. Another notable escape involved brothers Frank and Tom Gallagher, who orchestrated a daring breakout during a dust storm, only to be tracked down by the legendary Apache scout Tom Horn 2 weeks later near the Mexican border. The prison's nickname, the Hotel Hell, belied an unexpected truth. It was considered one of the humanely operated penal institutions of its time. Superintendent Thomas Gates insisted on cleanliness, adequate food and medical care, revolutionary concepts in an era when most prisons were little more than dungeons. The daily menu, preserved in prison records, included fresh bread baked in the prison's own bakery, beef stew, and vegetables grown in the prison garden overlooking the Colorado River. However, this didn't prevent the formation of the ball and chain gang, prisoners who worked on local road construction while wearing the heavy restraints that gave them their name. These chain gangs, supervised by the notorious guard Clayton Walls, built many of Yuma's early roads, including the path that would later become part of the Ocean-to-Ocean Highway. The facility's closure in 1909 wasn't due to reforms or humanitarian concerns, but rather overcrowding and the need for a larger, more modern facility. By 1907, the prison housed 127 inmates in a space designed for 104. The last prisoner, William Green, convicted of murder in Globe, left on September 15, 1909, marking the end of an era in Arizona's territorial justice system. The buildings subsequently served various purposes, including a high school from 1910 to 1914, earning the peculiar distinction of having its football team nicknamed the Criminals. Coach John Worthy remarked in a 1912 newspaper interview, "Our boys embrace the nickname. They say it gives them a psychological advantage over the opposition." Today, the Yuma Territorial Prison stands as a state historic park, its weathered walls and iron-barred windows telling tales of frontier justice, human endurance, and the complex social fabric of the American Southwest. The guard tower, known as the Eye of God by prisoners, still looms over the Colorado River, and visitors can peer into the infamous dark cell. The prison cemetery, containing 104 graves marked with iron crosses, holds the remains of those who never left the hellhole alive, including notorious train robber Buckskin Frank Leslie, who died of tuberculosis in 1882. Visitors today can still see the iron rings in the dark cell where prisoners were chained, touch the thick stone walls built by convict labor, and read the graffiti carved by desperate men and women over a century ago. These silent testimonials, along with the comprehensive prison records, photographs, and artifacts, provide an unvarnished glimpse into a crucial chapter of Western American history, where justice and punishment, reform and retribution, humanity and cruelty coexisted behind the walls of what many called the hellhole by the river. Chains in the Rockies, the haunting legacy of Montana's first territorial prison. In the shadow of the Flint Creek Range, where the Deer Lodge Valley stretches beneath Montana's big sky, stands a forbidding structure of weathered sandstone and iron that once housed the territory's most dangerous criminals. The Montana Territorial Prison in Deer Lodge, operational from 1871 to 1979, stands as a testament to the raw justice of America's frontier era, its walls still echoing with over a century of desperate tales and dark history. Construction began in 1870 under the supervision of architect Hubert B. Miller, with inmates quarrying the sandstone from nearby hills while living in a temporary wooden stockade. The initial structure, costing $40,000, approximately $850,000 in today's currency, consisted of 14 cells designed to hold 28 prisoners. However, by the time it received its first inmate, Samuel Hughes, convicted of horse theft on July 2, 1871, the prison was already showing signs of overcrowding, a problem that would plague the institution throughout its existence. The prison's most notorious warden, Frank Conley, who served from 1890 to 1921, transformed the institution through an innovative but controversial convict labor program. Under his administration, inmates built many of Deer Lodge's landmark structures, including the Powell County Courthouse and the city's water system. Conley's personal diary, discovered in 1967, reveals his philosophy. Idle hands breed dangerous minds. Better to wear out their bodies than let their minds plot mischief. During his tenure, the prison expanded to include a women's ward, a maximum security unit dubbed the Tank, and the distinctive Clark Theatre, where inmates performed plays for the public. Among the prison's most infamous residents was Harvey Kid Curry Logan, member of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. Imprisoned for robbery, Logan orchestrated a daring escape on June 27, 1903, taking advantage of lax security during a baseball game between inmates and local townspeople. Prison guard Timothy O'Brien's official report states, "The prisoner simply walked away during the 7th inning stretch, cool as you please, like he was heading to buy a bag of peanuts." Logan was never recaptured, though his eventual fate remains disputed among historians. The prison's female ward, operational from 1895 to 1963, housed some of the West's most notorious women criminals. Julia Slick Morgan, imprisoned for running an elaborate confidence scheme that defrauded minors of over $50,000, maintained a detailed journal of prison life. Her writings, now preserved in the Montana Historical Society, describe harsh conditions. The cells freeze in winter and bake in summer. The guards treat us like we're less than human, but we find ways to remain women despite their efforts to make us animals. The Clark Theatre, funded by copper magnate William Clark, served as both entertainment venue and rehabilitation tool. Inmates performed Shakespeare, vaudeville acts, and original plays written by prisoners. The theatre's guest book, maintained from 1919 to 1957, contains signatures of notable visitors including Charlie Russell, who sketched scenes of prison life, and future President Harry Truman, who attended a performance of Hamlet in 1939 while serving as a senator. Perhaps the darkest chapter in the prison's history occurred during the riot of April 16, 1959, when inmates Jerry Miles and Lee Smart led an uprising that resulted in the death of Deputy Warden Ted Rother. The 36-hour standoff ended when National Guard troops stormed the facility using tear gas and heavy weapons. Survivor George Alton, a guard held hostage during the riot, later wrote in his memoir, 36 Hours in Hell, "The sound of gunfire echoing off those stone walls was like the devil's own orchestra." The prison's architecture reflected evolving theories of incarceration and rehabilitation. The 1912 maximum security unit known as the Tank featured Montana's first death row, where 39 executions were carried out between 1915 and 1943. The last man to face the gallows, Philip Coleman, reportedly told Warden Frank Conley, "It's a fine day to die, Warden. Shame to waste it on such ugly business. The gallows, constructed of local pine by inmates, required 13 steps to reach the platform, a detail that spawned numerous superstitions among prisoners. Life inside Deer Lodge was regulated by an elaborate system of privileges and punishments. The silent system, implemented in 1890, prohibited inmates from speaking except during designated periods. Violations resulted in confinement in the hole, a basement cell measuring 4x6 feet with no light or sanitation. Prisoner William Rancourt's smuggled letters describe the experience. A man might keep his sanity for a day in that blackness, but after a week, the darkness starts speaking back to you. The prison's industries program, established under Warden Conley, included a brick factory, ranch, dairy farm, and furniture workshop. By 1915, prison-made products generated over $100,000 annually, equivalent to approximately $2.7 million today. The prison ranch, spanning 30,000 acres, produced beef and grain while teaching inmates agricultural skills. Ranch foreman Thomas Mackenzie's records show that inmates who participated in the program had a significantly lower rate of return to crime, 23%, compared to the general prison population's 58%. Prison records reveal fascinating details about daily life within the walls. The standard diet in 1890 cost 18 cents per prisoner per day, approximately $5.50 in current value, and consisted primarily of bread, beans, and occasional meat. Kitchen logs show that inmates consumed an average of 2,400 pounds of beans and 1,800 loaves of bread weekly. Special holiday meals were provided on Christmas and Thanksgiving, with the 1915 Christmas menu listing roast turkey, mashed potatoes, and apple pie, a rare luxury that cost the institution an extra $127.50. The prison hospital, established in 1896 under Dr. Frederick Mettler, treated everything from workplace injuries to tuberculosis outbreaks. His medical journals document the use of both traditional and experimental treatments. During the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, the prison lost 26 inmates despite implementing strict quarantine measures. Dr. Mettler's successor, Dr. James Harrison, pioneered the use of occupational therapy, writing, "The mind must heal before the body can follow." One of the most peculiar aspects of prison life was the baseball team, the Prison All-Stars, established in 1908. Playing on a diamond within the prison walls, the team competed against local clubs and even some semi-professional teams. Prison records show they maintained a winning record most seasons, including an impressive 28-3 streak in 1912. Former guard Michael O'Malley noted in his memoir that baseball games were the only times you'd see guards and inmates cheering for the same side. The prison's relationship with the town of Deer Lodge was complex. While the institution provided significant employment and economic benefits, it also cast a shadow over the community. Local newspaper editor Marcus Daly wrote, "Our little town is known not for its beauty or its people, but for that grey fortress that broods over us like a thundercloud." Nevertheless, many residents worked as guards or administrative staff, and the prison's industries provided goods and services to the community. Among the more unusual artifacts preserved from the prison's history is the catalogue of confiscated items detailing ingenious contraband discovered by guards. These included a still made from kitchen pots, a radio constructed from spare parts stolen from the electrical shop, and numerous handmade weapons. Perhaps most impressive was a detailed 15-foot escape tunnel discovered in 1916, which inmate Charles Miller had dug over 8 months, using only a spoon and a piece of metal from his bed frame. The prison's maximum security unit, the Tank, housed some of the West's most dangerous criminals. Guard duty logs describe elaborate security measures, including hourly checks and a system of colored lights to indicate different security levels. Tank resident James Whitey Morgan, imprisoned for multiple murders in 1923, left detailed wall carvings that can still be seen today, including a precise calendar marking 8,412 days of confinement and a poem that reads, Stone walls and iron bars make cages fit for prison stars, but stones can break and bars can bend when time becomes your only friend. Weather posed significant challenges to prison operations. The severe winter of 1886 saw temperatures drop to -52 degrees Fahrenheit, freezing water pipes and forcing inmates to be temporarily relocated to the kitchen and dining hall. Summer temperatures in the cell blocks could reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit, leading to what guards called hot weather madness. Chief Engineer Robert Patterson's maintenance logs detail constant battles against the elements, including repeated repairs to the heating system and efforts to prevent snow from collapsing the roof. The prison's disciplinary records provide insights into daily struggles for control. The Black Book meticulously documented infractions and punishments. Common offenses included fighting, typically punished by bread and water diet, insolence to guards, resulting in loss of privileges, and attempted escape, leading to time in the hole. A particularly creative escape attempt in 1907 involved 3 inmates who spent months training pigeons to carry messages, only to be discovered when a guard noticed suspicious crumbs in the exercise yard. Health concerns regularly plagued the facility. Dr. Sarah McIntyre, who served as prison physician, maintained extensive records of disease outbreaks and treatments. Her reports document a devastating tuberculosis epidemic in 1916 that claimed 37 lives and led to the construction of an isolation ward. She pioneered the use of ultraviolet light treatment for TB patients, noting in her medical journal, "What these men lack most is sunshine, both literal and metaphorical." Her innovative approach to prison healthcare included mandatory exercise periods and dietary improvements that reduced the mortality rate by 40% during her tenure. The prison's unique system of inmate classification, developed by Deputy Warden Michael Sullivan in 1908, became a model for other institutions. Sullivan's progressive merit system divided inmates into 4 classes based on behavior and work performance, with corresponding privileges and responsibilities. His detailed ledgers show that prisoners could advance from 4th class, restricted to cells except for meals and mandatory work, to 1st class, enjoying privileges such as extended yard time, tobacco rations, and better work assignments, through good behavior and dedicated work. The system's success led to its adoption by several other Western prisons, with Sullivan noting in his report, "A man will climb any ladder if you show him the top rung." The prison's agricultural operations expanded significantly under Warden Conley's administration. By 1915, the prison farm encompassed over 30,000 acres, including wheat fields, vegetable gardens, and livestock operations. Farm manager Robert Mackenzie's agricultural journals provide detailed accounts of crop yields, animal husbandry, and innovative farming techniques. The dairy operation, started in 1902 with 12 Holstein cows, grew to a herd of 200 by 1920, producing enough milk and butter to supply both the prison and local markets. Mackenzie's records show that the farm generated annual revenues exceeding $75,000, approximately $2 million today, by 1918. One of the most intriguing aspects of prison life was the development of its own internal economy. Despite official prohibition, a complex barter system evolved using hand-rolled cigarettes as currency. Guard William O'Reilly's unofficial notebook detailed common exchange rates. 1 hand-rolled cigarette could buy an extra slice of bread, while 5 cigarettes could purchase a better work assignment or a favorable cell location. More elaborate transactions involved gambling debts, protection services, and contraband goods. O'Reilly wrote, "The walls contain not just a prison, but an entire economic system operating in the shadows." The prison's response to World War I highlighted the complex relationship between incarceration and patriotism. When America entered the war in 1917, 76 inmates volunteered for military service, with 23 receiving commuted sentences to join the armed forces. Those remaining behind participated in the war effort through increased industrial production and victory garden cultivation. Prison records show that inmates purchased over $5,000 in war bonds through wages earned in prison industries. A poignant letter from former inmate James MacDonald, written from the trenches in France in 1918, reads, "Even the darkest cell in Deer Lodge couldn't prepare me for the darkness of these trenches, but at least here I'm fighting for something bigger than myself." The prison's final decades saw increasing challenges with aging infrastructure and changing correctional philosophies. Warden Henry Sullivan's report highlighted critical issues. "We're housing 21st-century inmates in a 19th-century fortress." A devastating inspection in 1975 by the American Correctional Association found 126 violations of modern prison standards. The last major riot in 1975, led by inmates protesting overcrowding, caused $450,000 in damages and finally convinced state legislators to approve funding for a new facility. The decision to close the prison came in 1979, when the last 386 inmates were transferred to a new facility in nearby Powell County on September 10, 1979, under the supervision of Warden Frank Rafter. Today, the Old Montana Prison stands as a museum and historical site, drawing over 50,000 visitors annually. The complex, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, offers guided tours through its imposing cell blocks, the Clark Theatre, and maximum security unit. Former guard Thomas Old Tom O'Brien leads special ghost tours during October, sharing stories of unexplained phenomena and alleged hauntings, including the famous Corridor 4 Whistler, a mysterious whistling sound often heard in the maximum security wing. Visitors can explore the prison's industrial buildings, view exhibits detailing famous escapes and riots, and even walk through the Hole. The cell of notorious escape artist Carl "Slippery" Johnson, who made 5 escape attempts, remains a popular attraction, complete with his elaborate tunnel markings. The museum's collections include over 32,000 artifacts, inmate-crafted items, guard uniforms, contraband weapons, and personal effects that tell the stories of those who lived and worked behind its walls. Notable items include the handmade chess set of Theodore Chess King Williams, who taught over 200 inmates to play, and the controversial punishment log, detailing various disciplinary measures. The prison's records, photographs, and documents are now valuable resources for historians studying American penology and frontier justice. As we delve into the grim history of the Wild West's most notorious prisons, one truth becomes clear: these institutions were not just places of confinement, but symbols of the harsh and untamed frontier justice that defined the era. Within their walls, lives were crushed, legends were born, and the line between lawman and outlaw often blurred. Whether it was the relentless heat-baking stone cells, the constant threat of violence, or the haunting echoes of doomed men awaiting the gallows, these prisons were more than just punishment. They were survival in its rawest form. The Wild West wasn't just a land of freedom, it was a land of reckoning, where justice was swift, unforgiving, and sometimes as crooked as the criminals it pursued. As the saying goes, out here, law is just another word for luck. It's a reminder of how fragile order was in a world ruled by grit, guns, and unrelenting determination. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the dark side of frontier justice. Until next time, stay curious and keep an eye on the past, because it always has more to reveal. Goodbye.